Welcome to AI Navigators, the Lokalise series that cuts through the AI hype to explore what's actually working. In each episode, we sit down with industry leaders and innovators to uncover the real-world AI applications driving measurable business impact. In this episode of AI Navigators, we sit down with Sasho Savkov, engineering manager for the AI ML team at Lokalise. With a PhD in clinical information extraction and nearly a decade building healthcare solutions, Sasho brings a unique perspective on what's actually working versus what's just noise. He challenges one of the biggest assumptions in AI today, that current single-shot learning approaches will lead us to human-level intelligence. His insights reveal why the missing piece isn't more sophisticated models, but something much more fundamental. Hey Sasho, thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you about AI and how you're building AI solutions. But before we jump into the questions, I just want to ask you a little bit about yourself and your role at Lokalise.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here. I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation. A little bit about myself. I am the engineering manager for the AI ML team. That's part of the translations domain, which means basically we are responsible for the AI translations that Lokalise is providing. I'm originally from Bulgaria, but based in the UK. I have a PhD in clinical information extraction, which is kind of an old school NLP AI discipline. And I have background in kind of health tech, AI, where I spent like maybe 7-8 years before I joined Lokalise.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned tech and AI, so I'm just interested to know a bit more about that. Like, what were you building in health tech?
Sure. So at the time when everything was happening, this was maybe like 6-7 years ago. Early chatbots were coming up, and they were starting to be AI powered rather than kind of rules based. And this was one of the things that I was doing, kind of extracting information from user queries, making sure that we connect them to the right answers or handle them correctly. And then the other thing that I did later on, just before ChatGPT became a thing, was actually building a tool for medics to summarize their consultations, their video consultations, based on their video and audio signal. So kind of like the notes systems that we have now in Google Meet or Zoom, but specific for clinicians and kind of, with tech that wasn't as good, so it needed a lot of tuning.
Okay, all right, great. That's using AI in a really impactful way, and it sounds like you've been in the AI realm for quite a long time now, like building AI solutions. So I'm just curious as to kind of what are you most excited about now in terms of AI?
So personally, I'm most excited about this kind of new generation of tools that are AI enhanced. So things like Cursor. So if you don't know, Cursor is basically what would be an IDE, so a development environment for programming, but it's fully AI integrated. So you can prompt your way through developing software, which is a very, very different way of doing it, because now a lot of things that used to take a lot of time to just like type up and do take very little time. But there's trade-offs. Sometimes the AI is not perfect, but it's fast. So I'm seeing and this is a tool that you can apply to other things like copywriting or, all kinds of like text-based activities. And I see this as something that is going to change how people work, like how much work we can get done. We're going to be very bad at it initially, but then eventually we're going to get much better at it, as well as the models are going to get better. So that's pretty exciting for me at the moment. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was going to ask actually if it's like a tool that non-technical people like myself could use and create apps and software. Yeah, I mean, totally. You can, as long as it's text-based. So you can definitely create software. I don't know if it's there yet. Cursor is probably the wrong one, but there is another tool that you could probably use called Lovable. That's in the same strain, but it's a bit more high level. So it's not as, Cursor is kind of like if you know exactly what you want to build, it's going to help you build it. Whereas Lovable is kind of like enable the everyday person to build like a small app, maybe using a template, maybe using something else.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot about Lovable and like vibe coding. I didn't even know what vibe coding was before, but it sounds super interesting for people.
This is vibe coding. Vibe coding the idea is basically, if like you're not writing the code and thinking through what the code is doing, you're just like kind of looking at it and getting vibe whether this is roughly what you want. And because if you have to think through everything that gets written, that's going to take too long. So it's easier to just kind of like get a vibe and test it.
Well, yeah, there are lots of like new innovations like vibe, like Cursor. So I'm just wondering if there's kind of one trend that you think, one AI trend that you think is overhyped, and maybe one that's not getting enough love at the moment.
So for me, that's probably kind of the same. There's one thing that we were using and it's kind of the cornerstone of the current AI utilization that we're witnessing. Like the academic term for it is basically single-shot learning, which means that our current AI models are really good at learning how to do something when you just give them one example of it, so they can kind of figure it out. And that's very useful because basically it allows you to like interact with the AI in this way that, you know, is very useful. Like you can tell it to do something very bespoke to exactly what you want to do, right? It's not like the generic way of writing a PRD. It's like the PRD that you want, you know, with those sections. So that's incredibly useful, and it delivers a lot of value through techniques like retrieval augmented generation, like basically providing context and providing like small examples of what exactly do you want to do. So that's like the really great value that it delivers. But the overhype that we see is that people kind of think that, oh, this is the way that things are going to work out. You know, this is how we get to AGI. This approach is going to solve basically how we get to superintelligence and so on. And I think people are wrong. This is not how we're going to get there. There's something that is missing, which is memory. So, I mean, this is both the curse and the blessing of the current AI method. You have to always explain from scratch. You know, if you want to do something twice, you have to always provide the same context and the same instructions for that single shot learning to happen every time, which is not the case for humans. You know, like if you get an intern and they're like a blank slate and you show them, here's how you write this PRD, or maybe they need like a few times, maybe a few pointers, but eventually like a week later they're gonna start writing their own PRDs, and you don't have to worry about telling them how to write the PRD again. And that's not the case with AI. We always have to tell them exactly how we want the PRD, and if that somehow, you know, changes, then they adjust. And there's also the undeterministic nature of AI, which makes this kind of more unpredictable. So that's the overhype of that technology.
And you mentioned RAG, because we actually spoke to Adam, who's in your team, like in the previous episode, and he was mentioning how it learns kind of, it can teach itself. So is that still considered single shot, even though it's kind of almost?
I mean, we're kind of simulating what's really missing is memory, right? Like what you don't have in the model is an ability to save something, to learn something, and persist it. And what companies do is basically kind of emulate that through an external system that acts as memory. And RAG is kind of that. Like we save things like, you know, past translations. We provide glossary terms that are relevant to you know, the current translation. That serves as basically what you would, in a human, that would be the experience of past translations, past work experience. We're just giving the right context so that the AI can figure out and construct past experience based on some information.
Hey, Sasho, thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you about AI and how you're building AI solutions. But before we jump into the questions, I just want to ask you a little bit about yourself and your role at Lokalise.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here. I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation. A little bit about myself. I am the engineering manager for the AI ML team. That's part of the translations domain, which means basically we are responsible for the AI translations that Lokalise is providing. I'm originally from Bulgaria, but based in the UK. I have a PhD in clinical information extraction, which is kind of an old school NLP AI discipline. And I have background in kind of health tech, AI, where I spent like maybe 7-8 years before I joined Lokalise.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned health tech and AI, so I'm just interested to know a bit more about that. Like, what were you building in health tech?
Sure. So at the time when everything was happening, this was maybe like 6-7 years ago. You know, early chatbots were coming up, and they were starting to be AI powered rather than kind of rules based. And this was one of the things that I was doing, kind of extracting information from user queries, making sure that we connect them to the right answers or handle them correctly. And then the other thing that I did later on, just before ChatGPT became a thing, was actually building a tool for medics to summarize their consultations, their video consultations, based on their video and audio signal. So kind of like the notes systems that we have now in Google Meet or Zoom, but specific for clinicians and kind of, you know, with tech that wasn't as good, so it needed a lot of tuning.
Okay, great. That's you're using AI in a really impactful way, and it sounds like you've been in. I just want to come back to your background as well in health tech. Like, how do you think these evolutions in AI are changing the health tech landscape?
Well, so health tech is kind of very, it's very difficult and very, there's a huge opportunity for change, but it's also kind of very slow to adopt it because of its inherent kind of conservatism. And when I was part of it, I saw a lot of these things that we could do, but in the end, it's kind of like a very human-based system. So I don't think we will see a massive change happening very soon. Like basically, it's always going to be lagging. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that ultimately, unless the system changes fundamentally, like we're not going to be able to exert as much kind of like help as much with AI, because in the end, it's kind of like care that needs to happen, and that's a human thing. Like unless we build robots, I guess maybe if we build robots, then we're going into that direction. But with the current AI that we have, kind of automating things is not enough. Like the healthcare domain is so optimized. The humans in it are incredibly good at everything. So it's really difficult to race with them. I would say we probably are not going to see a big impact in the next 5-10 years. There are going to be slow changes. Certain things are going to get better, but governments need to get data more centralized so that it can be used better. So governance probably needs to be relaxed a little bit to make sure that AI can be leveraged. And eventually we probably need to kind of rethink how hospitals work and how health tech is applied. But these are going to be very slow processes. It's not going to, like, I mean, you probably don't want them to happen like from this year to the next year. You know, you really want to think deeply about how this happens, because it has profound effects on human healthcare, on, you know, lives.
Yeah, no, totally. And I wanted to ask as well, like in localization, like how do you see AI playing a big role in localization in healthcare?
So I actually did localization for one of the companies that I worked for. That was kind of the same. That was done pretty much the same way that we did it that we're doing it now in Lokalise. It's just it was done by us, kind of hacking it away, doing a lot of machine translation, and trying to fine-tune the model so that we get good results. We were doing it for Chinese. Chinese was very difficult to translate into. We didn't have any native speakers, and we had just one very, very expensive translator who was able to translate what we were trying to translate into Chinese, because healthcare data is not just like, you know, your regular kind of data, and nuances mattered, and they mattered even more for the machine learning models that we were training on top of that data. And I think this basically translates, like, health tech are going to have the same problems now. It's just, you know, it's going to be much easier for them to handle this kind of localization effort. On the other hand, probably like more healthcare oriented companies, like hospitals that are, you know, trying to localize their apps or their web portals to like different languages, you know, in more international countries are kind of doing that. There's a lot of, like, you know, I don't know, in Germany there's always kind of like Turkish language version of websites and so on. So this kind of effort is very much similar to what software localization looks like in any other domain. What is common for both those is that you probably want to have humans definitely look at the translation in the end and kind of adjust it and make sure that it's the right thing. I don't think that's going to change for the foreseeable future. Both, I mean, in health tech, that's regulatory reasons. In healthcare, it's more like very, very strong kind of branding reasons that you want to do that. So yeah, I think that's probably how things are going to evolve.
Okay, and have you seen like an increase in adoption of AI in the healthcare industry? I'm not sure if you have insights into that at all.
I mean, that's it really depends where, but yes, overall, that is something that is happening very much on kind of on all fronts. Everyone's trying, kind of really truly adopting AI is actually a very small percentage, and this is what I was talking about in the beginning, because in health tech especially, you have to go through a lot of regulation. Especially in Europe, there's very strict regulations about medical devices, and most of the things that you do with AI are kind of like, if it's related to decision making, then it's a medical device, and then there's a lot of things that you need to do. So there's a lot of companies that try to be health tech AI related. Few companies actually manage to really employ AI legally and make a difference. I think that number is going to grow, but it's going to be a steady grow. It's not going to be an explosion.
So what's one thing AI still can't do?
Well, remember how to do what it just did.
Yeah, we've already answered that one, I guess. How do you imagine AI in daily life 10 years from now?
It's very difficult to imagine, but I think it's going to be everywhere. It's kind of going to be like, I think in 10 years, we're going to be asking ourselves the questions that we should be asking ourselves now, which is like, how much do we need to adopt AI, and like, what are the safety procedures and all that. So I think in 10 years, we're going to be having the crisis that we're having now with social media, but with AI, which doesn't sound very great, but you know.
No, it doesn't.
Maybe we'll do better this time.
Maybe we should start responding to those questions now. Okay, if you could give AI a voice, what celebrity would it be?
Okay, so I think Adam said Emma Thompson, which I stand by. But if I have to give my version of this, would be a synthetic voice. So I think the most befitting is just like if we could fully synthesize a voice by just kind of making it totally AI and not like someone else.
That's a good answer. Okay, and if AI could learn one human skill overnight, what would it be, or what should it be?
I'm not going to say memory this time. I mean, it should be memory, really. But I think if it had memory, I would say it needs genuine empathy, genuine creativity. So I guess these are the three things that we don't have right now in the AI. There's no memory, there's no learning from what you do, there's no kind of empathizing with someone, and there's no creativity. It's just kind of repetition of things that we've already seen.
And finally, last question, what's one localization task that you'll only trust a human with?
Okay, that is a tough one. I don't know. I'm from the team that would argue the opposite, to be honest.
maybe, coming back to your past.
So I think review is still very important. I think the human review is kind of the thing that we do have to have in many cases. But what's the extent of that is, it really depends on the use case, but I think it's very valuable, both for the AI and for the end result, to have the human at the end provide the review. Great.
Well, thanks so much, Sasho. This has been really interesting, and look forward to following up maybe with some more questions about health tech.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a very nice conversation.
Bye.